When Lila and Marcus moved into the old house at the end of Hawthorne Lane, they thought it was just a quiet place to start fresh. But the moment they crossed the threshold, the air felt heavier. The shadows deep around the house was already watching them. What they didn't know was that this home had a memory of its own, and it never let anyone leave. I had always dreamed of living somewhere quiet, far away from the chaos of the city, where the noise of traffic and the endless chatter of people would fade into nothingness. When I finally found the house, I thought my dream had come true. It was a modest two-story home at the very end of a narrow, overgrown street. The paint was faded, and the shutters hung slightly crooked, but there was something about the place that called to me. Maybe it was the isolation, or maybe it was just the way the old trees leaned in as if to shelter it. Whatever it was, I felt a sense of relief the moment I walked up the cracked stone pathway and pressed the key into the rusty lock. The inside smelled faintly of damp wood and something older, something that didn't belong entirely to this world. I spent hours wandering through the empty rooms, imagining where my furniture would go, how the sunlight would fall in the mornings, how the quiet would wrap around me like a blanket. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, savoring the feeling that this was finally my place. The wooden floors creaked under my weight, but I told myself it was just the house settling, the way old homes do. Every corner had its charm, dusty, yes, but alive in a way that made me feel I belonged. By late evening I had finished most of the unpacking. The house had fallen into a comfortable silence, the kind that almost hums, the kind that seems to listen as much as you do. I made my way to the bedroom, dragging a box of books behind me, and for the first time, I felt truly at peace. I thought I could hear the wind outside, whistling softly through the trees, but I didn't mind. The quiet felt safe, soothing even. But then, around midnight, the calm began to crack. I was arranging my bedside table when I heard it, a soft creak from the staircase behind me. My heart leapt, and I froze. The house was supposed to be empty except for me. I told myself it was nothing, just the old floorboards adjusting. But the sound came again, slow and deliberate. Footsteps. Someone or something was moving above me. I told myself to be rational. I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the stairs, each step making the wood groan beneath my feet. The air had grown colder, and I realized I was holding my breath. As I reached the top, the sound stopped. Silence. I peered down the hallway. The doors were all closed. Nothing seemed out of place. I shook my head, chiding myself for being jumpy, and turned to head back to my room. Then I heard it again, this time from the kitchen, a faint scraping noise. Slow and irregular, as if someone were dragging something across the floor. My stomach twisted. I forced myself to step toward the kitchen, telling myself that maybe a shelf had shifted or the wind had moved something. But when I flicked on the light, the room was empty. Not a single object had moved. The scraping didn't stop. It seemed to grow closer, moving along the hallway toward my bedroom. I wanted to run, to hide under the blankets, and pretend the noises weren't real. But I couldn't. Something in the air pressed down on me, a feeling that I wasn't alone, that the house itself was aware of me. I turned slowly, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and then I saw it. A shadow in the hallway mirror. At first I thought it was mine, but it wasn't. It lingered behind me, tall and featureless, its shape barely distinguishable in the dim reflection. My pulse raced. I spun around, but the hallway was empty. I wanted to tell myself it was a trick of the light, my imagination running wild, yet the cold prickling sensation on the back of my neck told me otherwise. I retreated to the bedroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, flashlight clutched to my chest. The house was silent again, or at least it seemed so. But I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching, of something waiting. I lay down finally, exhausted, hoping for sleep to come and carry me away from the creeping dread. Just as I began to drift, I noticed it again, the mirror. The shadow was back, standing just behind the foot of the bed this time. I dared not move. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe. It simply waited, watching, silent and patient. And in that moment, I realized that the house wasn't just old or quiet, it was aware. Morning came, but it brought no relief. Sunlight struggled through the thick, dusty curtains, casting weak, pale stripes across the wooden floor. I told myself that last night was just nerves, that old houses made noises, that shadows always looked stranger in the dark. But as I moved through the rooms, arranging the remaining boxes and tidying the kitchen, a creeping unease settled in my chest. Something didn't feel right, though I couldn't yet say what. The air had a heaviness I hadn't noticed before, like it was pressing down on me, watching my every move. I tried to focus on practical matters and packing, organizing, making the space feel like mine. Yet little things began to unsettle me almost immediately. Doors I had left wide open were now shut tight. Drawers that I had carefully closed were slightly ajar. Objects I had placed on counters or shelves had shifted, but not randomly. It was as if someone or something had been moving them, testing me. At first I blamed forgetfulness, exhaustion from the move, or the house settling. But then I saw the handprint on the bathroom mirror, a small, smudged mark, low on the glass, that hadn't been there the night before. I had been alone, and yet someone had left it. Fear started to creep along my spine like ice. I wiped the handprint, heart hammering, telling myself it must be a mark from my own hand or maybe a smudge of dirt. But deep down, I knew it wasn't mine. The house had already started to claim its presence, silently and insistently. The noises I had ignored the night before, the faint creaks and groans, returned, subtle but unmistakable. Whispers of movement behind doors, the floors settling, shadows twisting across the walls, all suggesting that I wasn't as alone as I thought. I decided to start keeping a log, a way to track the strange events. Perhaps if I documented them, I could make sense of what was happening. But the act of writing seemed to invite more anomalies. I discovered entries in my notebook that I didn't remember writing. Phrases etched in hurried, jagged handwriting, not my own. "I see you," one said. Another, "Stay inside." My hands shook violently as I flipped through the pages, the words seeming to leer at me. How could anyone else have written these? I lived alone. The house was supposed to be mine. The feeling of being watched grew stronger throughout the day. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing in the hallway, someone waiting in a dark corner. But there was never anyone there. And yet, I could feel it's a persistent, invisible gaze that seemed to follow me from room to room. Even the furniture felt alive, as though it was subtly shifting to obstruct my path, subtly guiding me, corralling me. Even with daylight, I couldn't shake the unease that filled the house. The shadows were too sharp, the quiet too deep, the corners too dark. I tried to reassure myself, tried to focus on mundane things, making tea, unpacking books, tidying up the kitchen, but everything seemed to warp around me. I could swear I saw shapes moving just at the edge of my vision, forms that vanished whenever I turned to face them. By evening, exhaustion had dulled my fear slightly, but it was replaced by something worse, a sense of inevitability. I could feel the house's presence pressing closer, encroaching on my mind, testing the boundaries of my courage. I returned to the bedroom and noticed the photographs I had hung on the walls. All of them, landscapes and family portraits, had turned to face the wall except one. That one photograph, a view of a sunlit meadow I had loved, remained outward. But it wasn't the photograph itself that made my stomach tight-knit, was what I saw in it. Behind the tiny figure of myself in the meadow, a dark shape lingered, barely visible, and it was staring straight at the camera. I dropped the photo in horror, fumbling to hide it under the bed. The sensation of being watched intensified. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified, every creak or groan of the old house signaling that something unseen had moved closer. My heart raced, my breath came shallow, and I realized I was no longer just afraid of the dark, I was afraid of the house itself. It had grown aware, conscious of me, and I was beginning to understand that it would not let me go easily. When I finally tried to sleep that night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening. Somewhere in the walls, the whispers started again. Soft, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. And then I noticed the faint outline of a shadow at the doorway, just beyond the dim glow of my bedside lamp. Motionless, waiting. It didn't move when I blinked. It didn't disappear when I turned my head. And as my eyelids grew heavy, I realized with a sinking dread that I was not alone. And whatever it was, it had already begun to learn me. Days had begun to blur into each other. The house no longer felt like a minute, felt like a predator waiting patiently for its prey. Even in daylight, I could feel its presence pressing down on me, subtly shifting the air, curling the shadows in unnatural ways. I tried to leave for errands, to step outside and breathe, to remind myself that the world beyond these walls was real and safe, but every attempt became frustratingly impossible. I would open the front door only to find the yard distorted, the path twisted and overgrown in ways that didn't match what I had seen before. The trees seemed taller, the grass thicker, and the light harsher, almost unnatural. It was as if the house was keeping me trapped, bending reality itself to its will. At night, the air felt heavy, thick with a presence I couldn't name. I began noticing things I had never seen before. The way the floorboards creaked under my weight, even when I was standing still. The way the walls seemed to hum faintly, almost in rhythm with my heartbeat. I told myself I was imagining things, but my reflection in the mirrors no longer looked quite like me. Sometimes it lagged behind, a second too slow, and other times it seemed to smirk when I didn't. I stopped using the mirrors, afraid of what I might see if I dared to look. One night a faint smell of smoke woke me. It was thin, acrid, and carried the sharp tang of something burning. I followed it to the living room, flashlight trembling in my hands, only to find the fireplace ablaze. The logs were burning with a strange, quiet heat that produced no crackling sound. I hadn't lit it. My fingers hovered above the flames, and I felt the heat lick my skin without ever actually touching me. Then I noticed it, a scratch on the wooden floor I didn't remember seeing before, deep, jagged, forming a circle around the hearth. Within the circle, the wood seemed darker, almost wet, pulsing faintly as if it were breathing. Panic seized me, and I turned to run, but the house seemed to stretch, the hallways bending and twisting. Doors that should have led to other rooms opened onto walls, or into the shadows themselves. The whispering began again, low and guttural, moving with me through the corridors, teasing me. It was almost playful at first, like it was testing my reactions, but the longer it went on, the more malicious it became. I began to feel watched, not just by something in the shadows, but by the house itself. I barricaded myself in the bedroom, using every chair and piece of furniture I could find, and tried to calm my racing thoughts. But the house would not let me rest. The floorboards groaned as if someone or something was pacing outside my door. I could hear the faint dragging of nails across the wood, scratching closer with every passing minute. My heart pounded in my ears, my hands were clammy, and I realized I was shaking uncontrollably. And then, a new horror appeared. From the hallway mirror, I saw movement slow, deliberate, as though a shadow was being shaped by some invisible hand. It wasn't in the reflection of the room, only in the mirror itself. It stretched and twisted, forming vague limbs, reaching out toward me. I stepped back, tripping over a chair, but when I looked again, it had retreated, leaving the glass empty. Yet the cold presence lingered, heavy in the room. Sleep became impossible. Every corner of the house seemed alive, every shadow a potential threat. I wandered from room to room, flashlight in hand, trying to map the distortions, trying to make sense of the impossible. But every hallway seemed longer, every stair steeper, every door leading to a place I hadn't seen before. The house was growing, changing, aware of me and my fears, and I could feel it savoring each moment of my terror. The most chilling moment came when I returned to the living room to check the circle by the fireplace. It had grown. The dark, pulsing shape had expanded, spreading across the floor like ink in water. And at the center of it, something that had not been there before, a shape that vaguely resembled me, crouched and still, as if waiting. I stumbled backward in horror, and that was when I heard the laughter, low, guttural, cruel. Not from the walls, not from the shadows, but from the house itself. It wasn't mocking me, it was claiming me. I ran to the bedroom and slammed the door, pressing my back against it. The house was silent now, but I could feel its pulse through the floorboards, through the walls, through the air itself. I knew, with an almost unbearable certainty, that it was learning me, and the thought made my stomach turn. Whatever was inside this house wasn't just haunting it. It was alive, and it was waiting for me to become part of it. Sleep had become a distant memory. Every night, I lay awake, listening to the house breathe, listening to the faint whispers that slithered through the walls and floorboards. Even in the light of day, the house had a presence that made my skin crawl. Shadows no longer followed logical patterns. They stretched unnaturally, bending corners, pooling under doors, and creeping up walls with a sinister intent. The air felt thicker here, heavy with something unseen, something aware. It wasn't just old, it was alive, and it was studying me. I tried to escape. I thought that maybe, if I spent enough time outside, I could break the hold the house had over me. But each time I opened a door, the world outside seemed wrong. The trees leaned inward, their branches knotted like claws. The garden path wound in impossible directions, and the sky itself seemed muted, pale, unnatural. No matter which direction I ran, I always ended up back inside, standing in the same living room I had longed to make my sanctuary. The house had reshaped the world around it, bending reality until there was no escape. By now, the walls felt alive. Every creak of the floorboards, every hollow sound of wind through the eaves, carried a threat. I tried photographing the rooms, hoping that the camera might capture what my eyes could not. Some proof of the house's presence, but each photo revealed horrors I hadn't seen in real time. Shadows appeared where none had been, shapes crouched in corners, limbs stretching at impossible angles. Some photos even showed forms behind me, blurry and indistinct, yet unmistakably watching. I began to dread looking at them, yet I could not stop. Each image confirmed what I had long suspected. The house was gathering me, studying me, learning how I reacted, learning how to break me. I stopped trying to leave. Every hallway had begun to twist. Doors that had once led to bedrooms now opened into darkness that stretched endlessly, as if the house had grown in size, shifting while I wasn't looking. Stairs spiraled impossibly, leading to rooms I had never seen. The house was alive, breathing, stretching, shaping itself around me. It was no longer a home, it was a trap. One night I returned to the living room, my flashlight trembling in my grip, hoping to confront the dark circle by the fireplace again. What I saw made my stomach twist in terror. The circle had grown, spreading across the floor like a dark wet stain that pulsed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Within it, forms began to emerge, ghostly outlines of bodies crouched and waiting. And at the center, unmistakable and horrifying, was my own reflection, or rather, a distorted version of me. Its eyes were hollow, black voids, and its mouth stretched in a grin that I had never made. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over the furniture I had shoved in the hallway, and that was when I heard the whispers. They weren't distant anymore. They were all around me, soft, insistent, and filled with a cruel amusement. "Come," they hissed. "Join us." The voice was not one. It was many, layered and echoing, coming from every shadow, every corner, every crack in the walls. My heart raced so fast I thought it would burst from my chest. I ran to the bedroom and slammed the door, pressing my body against it as if sheer weight could hold the house at bay. But the room was not safe. I could feel the walls breathing, moving slightly, pressing in on me. The whispers continued, relentless, teasing me, promising me that I could not hide. Then came the movement in the mirrors. I had been avoiding them for days, but now there was no escape. One by one they began to ripple, as if water flowed beneath their surfaces. Shadows moved within, crawling, stretching, reaching toward me. I realized with mounting horror that the figures I had seen in my photographs were forming a procession. A line of shapes, pale and twisted, all facing the same direction, all advancing toward a single point. I followed their gaze and saw it, my body lying in the hallway, eyes wide open, staring, pale and unblinking, as though the house had already claimed it. Panic clawed at me. I screamed, but no sound emerged. I slammed my fists against the walls, against the door, but the house absorbed my energy, feeding on my fear. I understood, with horrifying clarity, that the house was no longer just observing. It was shaping my reality, bending my mind, preparing me for whatever fate it had in store. And in that moment, I knew there was no escape, not really. The whispers continued long after I collapsed to the floor, shaking, tears streaking my face. The house had made its point. It was patient. It was waiting. And as I lay there in the darkness, listening to it breathe, I realized the final truth. The house didn't just want to scare me. It wanted to consume me. Desperation had replaced fear. Every nerve in my body screamed that I needed to escape, but I knew, deep down, that there was no way out. The house had claimed me entirely. Its presence was everywhere, in every shadow, every floorboard, every breath of air. I ran through the corridors, flashlight trembling in my grip, but the hallways twisted impossibly, stretching and bending as if the house itself were alive, reshaping the walls to trap me. Doors that should have led to rooms opened into voids. Staircases spiraled endlessly, and every attempt to flee brought me inexplicably back to the same living room, the same dark circle surrounding the hearth. The circle had grown even larger, spreading across the floor like spilled ink, pulsing with a slow, deliberate rhythm. I could see shapes within it now, vague and writhing, forms crouched and twisting as if they were alive. At the center, my own reflection, or a version of me, stood upright this time. Its eyes were black holes, and its grin stretched unnaturally wide, impossibly long. It didn't move, and yet I felt it observing me, judging me, waiting. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself out of the nearest window, but every instinct told me that the house had already anticipated it, that every escape I imagined had been folded into its will. I fled to the bedroom, slamming the door behind me and shoving everything I could against it. I pressed my back to the wall, my hands shaking uncontrollably, and tried to slow my breathing. But the room was not safe. The walls throbbed slightly, vibrating with a presence that was not merely physical but mental, like the house was pressing into my thoughts, learning my panic, savoring it. The mirrors in the room rippled, one after another, showing glimpses of the other rooms that no longer seemed real. Rooms where shadows moved independently of light, where floors and ceilings twisted in impossible ways. I realized with a sinking dread that the figures in the mirrors, the shapes I had seen in my photographs, were advancing. They moved in a procession, one behind the other, all focused on a single point, me. My body in the reflection of the living room lay on the floor, eyes wide open, staring at me in silent accusation. The thought struck me with terrifying clarity. The house was not just a place, it was a predator, and I was prey. It had already claimed me, had already created a version of me to keep me trapped, to watch and learn. The whispers began again, louder now, insistent, almost chanting, "Join us, join us." They were everywhere, in the walls, in the air, in my own mind. I tried to cover my ears, but the sound penetrated, vibrating inside my skull. I fell to the floor, rocking back and forth, pleading silently, begging the house to leave me alone. But the house didn't answer, it didn't need to. Its intentions were clear. I was already part of it. The last coherent thought I had before the darkness overtook me was that I had made a mistake. I had thought this house was mine, a place to escape to, a sanctuary. I had been wrong. It wasn't a home. It was alive, patient, and eternal, and it had been waiting for me all along. Weeks later, the house sits empty in the old neighborhood, overgrown and silent. The real estate listing claims it is available, promising a charming two-story with character. Neighbors say it has been empty for years, though some whisper that the house has a strange pull, that anyone who enters never quite leaves unchanged. But those are just stories, I tell myself, or I used to. I sometimes wonder what would happen if someone else moved in, if someone ignorant of the house's true nature tried to claim it. Would they see the shadows, hear the whispers? Would they notice the dark circles forming on the floors, pulsing faintly in rhythm with their own heartbeat? Or would the house simply wait, patient as always, creating another version of them to watch, to learn, to feed on fear until there was nothing left? And sometimes late at night, when the wind blows just right, I swear, I can hear a faint scratching, faint footsteps moving through the empty house. And if I press my ear to the wall, I can almost hear a whisper, "Now you belong to us." No one knows what happened to me. The truth, buried beneath layers of shadow and distorted reality, remains inside that house. It waits for the next resident. And perhaps, just perhaps, It waits for me.